Hello everybody and welcome to this podcast. Today we're going to be covering laptop security, end user security if you like, with a specialist guest. Could we call you a specialist guest? That sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? Mr. Damien Murphy.
I feel like I've been invited onto a special edition of the A-Team, to be honest, for those of my age.
We should start like that. Can we have the music going in the background?
That means I have to walk on in a very wooden way and act terribly, but smile at the camera and get star billing. Is that how it works?
We'd have to try and blow 5 people up without killing them, which is even more bizarre. So, yeah, okay, good. Thank you, Christian. Well, in this podcast, we're going to be talking about laptop security and I suppose more or less anything else, how that's changed over the last 5 or 10 years, because there's been a lot of changes in the way that we secure our access to our companies and our businesses. But more importantly, there's been a lot of changes in the way that laptops have been attacked over that period of time. Damien, welcome. You're joining us for this one, and I know you're a networking specialist who I've worked with on a regular basis. Briefly introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah, so I'm essentially a network engineer. I'm just interested that you were saying that how how laptop security has changed over the years, because I remember if I go back, maybe 10 years, which is, a reasonable amount of time, there wasn't really any such thing, wasn't it? I mean, when I was on call as a network engineer, I'd take my work laptop home, I'd plug it into my broadband to do whatever remote working I needed. And it was like security was just terrible. You just didn't think about it. You thought, well, I've got a network. I've got a broadband. Nobody knows about my broadband. So it's completely secure. And you just didn't worry about it. And now we've moved forward to this kind of almost paranoid state for good reason, because, people are being attacked and hacked and ransomware and all the rest of it. So it's become really important. But I just think back, as you said it, to how those things have changed. I don't even know if I had antivirus on my laptop 10 years ago. Certainly wouldn't have had anything sophisticated. It was so intrusive in terms of performance.
Absolutely. I remember that.
You used to find a way of turning it off.
Well, no, this is it. Every time you played a game on your home computer, you had to turn your antivirus off because it would just destroy the performance of it. Yeah, I know. And you could get free antiviruses, but they then became more sales tools than anything else, which again made you want to turn them off. But yeah, so a lot of things have changed in that. I mean, okay, just going with that then. So Windows Defender, for example, does anybody actually use anything other than Windows Defender as an antivirus tool for their home computer these days? Businesses use it and other things, don't they, for security? That's maybe more your area, Christian.
Well, I tell all the people that ask me it's enough. Maybe put something for the ransomware protection on. There are some kind of specialized tools for it for your home PC, but in general, Windows Defender is pretty good nowadays. And you shouldn't throw any money to any other companies regarding your home PC.
Yeah, no, granted. So Damien, I suppose the key element there really, if you're utilizing a computer for business, the general consensus used to be, okay, fine, you would do that and you would use like a Citrix gateway and do a remote desktop into your work PC. But that's sort of changed an awful lot these days in the fact that we're now using those machines more as part of our main network. So we're utilizing Office 365 a lot more to do all of our email, to look after all of our files, to look after other elements by which we connect into SharePoint, what have you, into the business network. But how are we securing that these days with regards to the way that laptops work?
I mean, I think it's multi-level, isn't it? I mean, it starts with, I no longer have a password to log on to my computer. I use my fingerprint. My work computer has got a certificate on it. So it's multi-factor authenticated before I even think of connecting over a VPN to work. So that's quite a step up in security compared to how it used to be. And then, as you say, when we then connect into work or whatever we're doing, we've then got other VPNs to be configured, rules. We can talk about how that can be managed in different ways. We're still pretty weak, I think, on things like how the laptop connects on a shared Wi-Fi, whether you're working at home or if you're in a cafe or something. You got to think about things like what does it mean when you use public Wi-Fi in your favorite coffee shop or on the train? How secure or insecure is your laptop if you just suddenly said, oh, you know what, I'm on the train. Oh, I'll use their Wi-Fi. It says it's public.
Yeah.
It's open. What does that mean? Oh, come on, I need Wi-Fi to work.
We chatted about this last time around, Christian. The key thing here is the fact that, I did a bit of research on this before we started the conversation, and the fact that there's still a lot of guidelines out there that say, oh, you should never connect your work laptop to somebody else's Wi-Fi connection. Don't do it in Starbucks. Don't do it in on your train. Don't do it where you're not sure. But in reality, most Wi-Fi these days is more or less bomb-proof. You've got an encrypted link to it. So is there any great requirement in your mind to actually worry about that sort of thing?
Well, I think if it's an open Wi-Fi, yes, because by definition, it's not encrypted. It's a shared broadcast medium. So somebody else sitting 3 seats away from you on the train, with a network scanner, can capture all of your packets because you're on a shared broadcast network. The security there is not based on the Wi-Fi. It's based on the fact that probably 99% of applications we use, they encrypt the traffic. So we all know about HTTPS on websites, and you get your nice little padlock up there, or at least used to in the old days, to say that the connection was encrypted. And that's what protects you. It's not the encryption on the Wi-Fi. It's your application that protects you.
Yeah, and that's the key. That's the key, isn't it? Almost all the websites you go to these days will be encrypted. Certainly all your banking websites will. Certainly your business websites will. SharePoint, Office 365, OneDrive, all of these business applications, they're already encrypted natively in the application itself. So it's only if you start doing stuff that is unencrypted that it becomes an issue, maybe.
Yeah, the only thing is when you log on to the open Wi-Fi and you have to put any of your credentials, they can be captured. So don't put anything on the on that local open Wi-Fi that's a credential that is of any concern to you or any security, because that can be captured, because that always goes in plain text. But once you're on and using it, then you can rely on your application, and that doesn't include the fact that typically. So there's the application level protection, which is pretty rock solid. And then the other level of protection of that is usually connecting over a VPN, especially if you're coming back to the office or you're getting some of your business or corporate resources over the internet. You're going to be using a VPN. So once again, it's encrypted, the application's encrypted. So that's really your protection. So if I think about me, I've got my fingerprint, I've got my certificate on the laptop. I'm using an encrypted application. If I'm to the internet, if I'm going to work, then I've got an encrypted VPN. So there's lots of different layers of encryption and protection that work. And I think you can't just have one. There's never a situation where one's going to fix everything, or at least that's kind of my thing anyway. And I think for me, the key thing, and especially around hybrid working, is it's really working us up to the risks of what we call split tunneling. And for those who might have heard the term and don't quite understand it, it means that at some point on your application, on your laptop rather, it will determine where your traffic is going. If you're going, let's say I'm on a train, I'm tapping away, I need to get a file from work, it will recognize the fact that packet needs to go to my work. So it will choose to go over my encrypted VPN tunnel. If I know they want to go to the internet, then it might decide, I don't want to go to the VPN. I'm going to go directly to the internet. And that's split tunneling. And
that's quite confusing these days from the point of view that, well, while you may be able to get a file from work via a VPN from a file server, if you wanted to get it from SharePoint, then it's coming from the internet. And if you wanted to send it to OneDrive, it's going to the internet. But if you wanted to get it from an application running in your office, then it's going via your VPN. So actually, it's very difficult for the user to understand what's going where, because they might not understand that, that SharePoint site's in Office 365, but that SharePoint site's running in the office. So they're going down completely different legs of that tunnel, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's why now the best advice is to have configurations where there is no split tunneling. You'll have some kind of business gateway, and all of your traffic, your laptop will say anything. I don't care if you're going to Tesco to do your online shop, or if you're going to work to download some important file, everything is going to go through that work gateway, because then we know it's going to go over this encrypted VPN to the gateway. And then from the gateway, the device that's there, the security device that's there, it's usually some kind of deep inspection packet firewall, layer 7 firewall. It will look at every packet and inspect it, both in and out, whether it's going into the enterprise or back out to the internet. And that's kind of like the A-grade security we kind of recommend for people now. Everything inspected, every single packet. It's a bit like the microscope.
Yeah. I'm going to say that's it's a bit like, I suppose this is again, okay, as will be quoted, and there's probably going to be music going with this. I'm old. So consequently, I remember points in the past whereby this used to be the case. We used to have a situation whereby if you had a company laptop, everything went through the company, and we then invented split tunneling because the fact that the company just didn't have enough bandwidth to the internet to allow all of its employees to go via that one location. But these days, that's not the case anymore. Nowadays, so actually, when I was saying, well, actually, no, we don't want split tunneling anymore because it's more difficult for us to secure it. So now let's revert back to how we used to do it, just because of the fact that bandwidth for the provider is no longer an issue.
Yeah, and it's not just security in terms of it being encrypted or not. You've got to think that if you're on your home broadband, your home Wi-Fi, another member of your family has been on some website. We won't go into it. They've got
dodgy websites.
No, not a family member. No, they've gone to what they thought was a website about puppies, but it turned out to be a bad site, and they've got their laptop infected because you're on shared Wi-Fi in your house. Your laptop's now infected, so now you're going to connect back, to your corporate enterprise. So, it being over a VPN and encrypted doesn't actually provide any encryption at all. All it just means is that there's horrible little parasitic, bad bits that go over to infect your work will just be encrypted in transit. But as soon as they get to work, they go, "Ah, we're here now. Let's go and find all those nice special bits of data in your company that we want to steal." So that's why I say it's not just about VPN. To me, it's a bit like, I always use an analogy. It's a bit like,
Sorry.
Whoa. That was a good introduction because it's a special. This is important. Listen. Well done, Christian. Perfect timing. So there's a ring at the doorbell, which we just heard.
And that was. Okay.
That's what that was. And it's the plumber. And you go, okay, are you the plumber? Show me your ID. Yes, perfect.
Okay, hold on. No, let's rewind. Okay, so the key difference here is, and actually this is slightly confusing because at the end of the day, not all VPNs are made the same. That's the point, isn't it? So what you're saying is conventional VPNs are essentially the plumber at the door, yeah? So a standard VPN.
Let me tell my story.
Go on. Because I just wanted to get back to the start, so it made sense moving.
It will all become clear.
Fine. I apologise.
Right. So the first thing is authentication. He proves who he is. He's the plumber. You look at his car, his van outside, it's got a phone number. You're massively paranoid. So you phone that number, you go, "Hello, have you got a plumber called Fred Plumber? Was he coming to my house today?" And they go, "Yes, what does it look like? He's got ginger hair and silly glasses." That's him. "I believe you're the plumber. Fantastic. In you come." Now that is obviously not just an analogy. That is the reality of how VPNs work.
Right. You essentially do two-factor authentication by checking his hair color. Nice. Okay, we've been into this before. I'm not sure hair color came up, but let's go with it. So once you've identified that he's the plumber, you let him in the house.
Yes.
And that's
it. But then traditional VPNs that is it. What he does in the house, you've got no visibility of. He could be in your kitchen doing the plumbing. He could be elsewhere around your house, robbing you blind. And that's why we say it's not just about, if you want to protect things, everything has to be connected. That's why we say everything has to go through the firewall and be inspected and checked. So we've drifted off a little bit from laptop security, but it's more about how you get from your laptop to the different resources you need. You need encryption and security with the connection. And then at some stage, you're going to need a really clever, insightful firewall. It's a bit like, like in the mail, it's like you've sent your letter in the mail, but there's somebody in the sorting office who's going to open it and read every letter to make sure it's safe before they put it back in the envelope and send it on. And that's essentially next generation firewall. Basically, it spends its time reading your mail. And what we're saying is, for next level security, that's what you need. Straightforward VPN isn't good enough. Everything's got no split tunneling. Everything's got to go to a powerful, full inspection firewall and be inspected.
And so essentially, this is now analogous to inviting your plumber into your house because you've done your hair factor authentication, and then essentially following him around for the next 2.5 hours while he's there, and leaning over his shoulder and going, "Oh yeah, I'm not sure.
Did
you tighten that up enough? Aren't you supposed to use that white tape? That sort of stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
That sort of business.
That's it. That's next layer. That's next layer security. Follow your plumber all around your house.
Damien, question: when you say everything has to go through that intelligent firewall system, there are nowadays ways to have those up in the cloud, so you don't have to go back home to your home network or to your company network to do exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
That's also a possibility. Yep. Just make sure that everything is checked, be it via the internal firewall, but maybe there are some bandwidth restrictions still nowadays because you live in Germany, for example. There might be the possibility to put that up somewhere in the cloud. There are also several vendors doing stuff like that. But everything can be inspected and then regulated the right way. Maybe even if it's a public cloud provider, then you have better speed, better connection, lower latency to public services, something like that. You might do.
I had a really interesting conversation with a customer the other day because I was talking to him about the two options. I said, we can either host this firewall for you and you could use us as your gateway, or, there are these other providers, they're very well-known providers that do this in the cloud themselves. And, he said, that sounds much better because that means, because if it comes to you, that means it's got to go from the home user all the way to your data center and then go out again. It's much better if I use a cloud provider. And so I said, well, what cloud provider are you thinking of using? And he told me the name. And I said, oh, yeah, they're 5 racks down the row in the same data center where we are.
Yeah, more or less the same latency on that basis.
Exactly. So, I thought, do you fall for it? Is it just me? Is it because I'm even older than you, Tony? When people say something's in the cloud, I think it actually is. I think it's sort of like there's some special white, cloudy Microsoft Azure or AWS data center up there in a literal cloud. And that's why it's so much better, because it's in a cloud. And when you say something, no, actually, it's in a data center. It's in a data center in a city near you. And it works exactly the same way as the same technology somewhere else. But it's such a difficult headspace to get around. Even I do it. Even I think, oh, you're cloud. Oh, no, cloud's better, because no, it's not. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, no, it is. And also the difference with the cloud is the fact that you will never know where the data center is unless you deliberately go and do some specific investigation, because as a SaaS provider, if they're providing this as a SaaS service, you don't necessarily gain control over that. You might gain control over which country it's in, but that's it. But they won't know, and it's this data center near Slough or Manchester or wherever. They won't tell you exactly where it is. On the contrary, that's not something they're prepared to divulge. In fact, to a certain extent, from a security perspective, it's a bit of a secret in places.
It is. Yeah.
They deliberately keep it from you, so for your protection.
Yeah, but where packets go as soon as when they leave your thing can be really strange. I mean, and it's going off at a tangent, which I'm sure this podcast never does. But when I was a network engineer, I used to often packet trace where packets were. So if we had a problem with latency or connectivity or poor performance, we trace where the packet was. And so at the time, I was based in the middle of the UK, and I was wanting to get to a data center in London, and with a particular ISP we had, the best route they had took me via Frankfurt and then back to London. So it's this thing of, like you say, as soon as the packet, we call them packets, as soon as a little bit of data leaves your laptop, where it goes to, you have no idea.
That's very true. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things for normal operation, for normal life of a user, like people who use the systems. That makes virtually no difference because everything is in milliseconds these days and nanoseconds in places.
Yeah.
So everything is in milliseconds. So it's incomprehensible to us. The only latency that we really see is the processing time that the engine at the other end is doing, not necessarily the packet time between us. That it becomes an issue when it's an application talking to an application or a system talking to an application. It's why you can't run storage arrays and servers 300 miles apart, because the fact that they need to talk to each other so fast that just doesn't work. But for normal operations, web-based activity, we have no comprehension of how far those packets are going. Could be going halfway around the world, and we would barely notice. We might think, well, it's a little bit slow today, but that's about it. It's astounding how far they go. Mm.
So I've kind of hogged this conversation about laptop security. I don't know if either of you has anything you'd want to add to it. It doesn't include plumbers, because I've already covered that subject off.
Let me put in one thing that I see all the time in the train regarding laptop security. Put those stupid display filters on your laptops when you're using them in public. It's so simple. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but it is a privacy shield. And it's called that for a reason, because everybody sitting around you can see what kind of financial data you're juggling with or whatever you're doing at the moment when you don't have such a thing. And there's hardware which is where the thing is even included. You don't have to put anything off it. You just have to press a button. Please do it. Really. My 5 stars.
That is such a good suggestion. Although I am slightly disappointed that people listening to this podcast might start doing it, because one of my things on a train journey when I'm really bored is looking at other people's laptops.
Oh, that's a nice PowerPoint presentation.
So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It happens. Yeah.
Okay, so there's probably GDPR involved in that. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
I remember those from like 10 years ago or more. I haven't seen them for years. I haven't seen anybody using one for years. I didn't even know they were still a thing.
They are, and actually there are some notebooks where you just have to press a button and it has some kind of fancy display magic in it, and it will have the privacy protection turned on, which I really, really like. But anyway, even if you don't have it, they cost like, I don't know, 30 euros, 40 euros. They should be part of every notebook that is handed out in a company, in my opinion. Do you remember in the past there was always the Kensington lock that would be handed out with a notebook?
Yes.
Nowadays that doesn't happen either anymore. We should put in the display protections.
Yeah, I suppose we've changed things slightly, haven't they? So the Kensington lock essentially used to be there would literally be a hook hanging out the side of the laptop that you would be able to then tie the laptop to the table with. That was the premise of that, wasn't
it?
Exactly. And that was great, but that assumed the fact that you were, well, first of all, you had something to tie it to. Maybe you can just tie it to yourself. Sort of have a rope around your neck.
The banksters.
Like I say, maybe let's maybe carry a briefcase with it tied on with a.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That would work. But you sit there thinking like, well, okay, hold on a minute. What am I going to tie it to? That's one thing. Yourself, obviously. Maybe you can have a nose piercing. Hang it from that. It's. Okay, I don't know where my brain goes sometimes. But the bizarre thing is these days what we've done instead is we've introduced stuff like drive encryption, Office 365, where everything is no longer on the laptop, or at least not only on the laptop. So all your SharePoint, all your OneDrive, so all your file data, all your internal data, all your email data is actually held somewhere else. You've just got a copy. So, and if you encrypt the drive and don't let anyone else have access to it, then it doesn't matter if someone steals the laptop, because they can't get in the drive and they can't. And essentially you can then, back at base, you can say, do a, this laptop will be destroyed in 10 seconds. Do a Mission Impossible to it, that sort of stuff. So do we still need physical security like a Kensington lock?
Maybe if you have very, very expensive hardware, let's put like, I don't know, a stupidly powerful mobile workstation or something where it's like 6,000 euros or something, then maybe this might make sense. But everybody hugging that away would be like carrying it very slowly because they are so heavy still.
They'd need wheels on it, wouldn't they, really, to be able to transport that one along?
No, I think what you said is exactly right.
Yeah, we worked our way around
ensure that there's encryption on the devices. Ensure that there's not somewhere a sticker typing the pre-boot pin or something on it, or just seen that, been there.
Well, there's a post-it note with the encryption key on it.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
So really just make sure that this doesn't happen. Ensure that there are some settings which could even bypass some kind of local encryption with BitLocker if you have the wrong BIOS settings, or no DMA protection and stuff like that turned on. So there are some settings that you should just take a look on, but besides that, I think it doesn't make sense to carry that Kensington lock anymore.
Yeah.
Really talk about the encryption part of it.
Nice. Okay, yeah, no, I agree with that. But yeah, display filters, bonkers. Did not know that was still a thing. I suppose we're also down to, and again, from a point of view of laptop security, and I'm slightly off topic, and we know we covered it before, but again, this goes back to the fact that if you want to utilize the built-in security like Windows Defender, like encryption within the drives themselves, all of that sort of stuff, you have to make sure you update the laptop to the very latest level whenever you can, because essentially, if those things aren't up to date, then you are vulnerable. Or that laptop is vulnerable. So you may then be exposed, even though you haven't lost your laptop, because someone else has managed to wheedle their way in through a 0-day.
So important. And also the drivers, not only the software, also the drivers, the BIOS, however, the UEFI, however you want to call it nowadays. But all that stuff also has to be updated because, vendors really put out patches regularly now. So keep that on your list.
So here's a controversial one then. What about the corporate approved application list?
I love it.
As a security guy, Christian loves it.
I love it. As an IT operations guy,
yes, there you go. I was going to say, as a guy who does stuff for a living.
There are modern approaches nowadays to work with that, right? There are different vendors like doing some kind of baselining, and everything that is in the baseline is okay. There are other approaches where you have the trusted installer, so everything that comes from the company environment is automatically able to run, but people are not allowed to do it themselves to install things themselves. So there are approaches now where the overhead and management isn't too high. Still something to work on, right? Absolutely.
Yep.
But it's getting easier, and this is something that I recommend to everyone. Take at least a look at it, and even if you don't have the chance to roll it out to 100% of your users, because you will have some kind of developers, hardware or software, whatever, or maybe your IT people that need to install things. Somebody in marketing normally shouldn't install things on their own. Shouldn't be an option. Somebody in finance? No. Big no.
Well,
right?
Whoa, what have you got against people in finance? I mean, that's not fair.
Nothing. They pay our bills. I just don't want them to have malware on their systems, because then I wouldn't get my paycheck. Right?
Okay, my priorities there then. I find that.
See that. No. Maybe you can do the 80-20 approach there also, and you will really have a big security increase in your environment if you have the chance to do it like that.
Yes, I agree. As much as I hate it, I do think it's pretty essential, really. Yeah, it's good.
I'm going to say and if with your home computer and that sort of thing, there are now the problem with Windows, not the problem with Windows, one of the benefits of Windows. There are many problems with Windows. This isn't one of them. One of the benefits of Windows is the fact that they actually do a pretty good job of updating themselves these days. All the individual elements of Windows, it patches itself quite well, and that's a good thing, because there were it's a big attack surface. But you can now buy, or you can get additional software like Sumo or Lobit and what have you that allows you to check all the other software on your machine and make sure that's up to date. And most laptops and computers will have some sort of built-in software that will then validate their BIOSes and what have you against the latest versions.
How are Mac devices in that sphere at the moment? I know a few years ago, certainly, Mac laptops, you used to just be able to hack them just by rebooting them and pressing a button, and you get root access as it then rebooted. So how secure now are MacBooks? Do we know?
I think they are also encrypted more or less by default nowadays. There is the disk encryption anyways, and there are even some points where I think they are a little bit ahead regarding security, especially all the extension stuff that can kind of grab into your system settings. You always get some kind of pop-up saying, hey, there is something, I don't know, the Logitech keyboard management software wants to read your extensions and do stuff. Do you really want to allow it? Stuff like that is going in there. And when you are in an Active Directory or Entra ID environment, which most of the company environments are, you now have the possibility to also use your Entra ID accounts on your Mac devices to log in even and build a trust relationship, just like Windows Hello for Business with the, it's called Platform SSO, which Apple now introduced like half a year or so ago. And then you have basically the same security that you can get with a Windows laptop, also 2FA, everything, conditional access and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty good nowadays.
I think that's one of the things I've noticed different over the last couple of years, whereas at one time it was always Microsoft, always Windows that was under attack. And you'd have your Mac sitting there for 15 years, never upgraded, and you just felt it was safe. Now, Apple release security updates probably more often than Microsoft do.
Yeah. The only thing I don't like is that they sometimes push something out which they don't announce, which as an IT person, if I'm responsible for a large fleet of devices, I should know what happens there. But in general, they really pushed hard. And I heard a stat from Microsoft that now 20% of all the devices in enterprises are Mac OS devices.
Wow.
So you have to really take them into your management. You really have to take care that they are patched, that they are secured, that only the allowed software is running and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think to a certain extent, you mentioned Entra ID and elements like that. And I think, and I suppose we say most businesses are now using that sort of stuff because of Office 365. So it is definitely a high percentage. But I think this is part of the Microsoft sales element with regard to this, is the fact that everything is linked with regard to that, isn't it? It's the way you run your Office, the way you run your defense, the way you run your authentication. Everything now goes through one central hub. It's an all your eggs in one basket situation, probably, because if Microsoft is compromised, then therefore a lot of things are compromised. But also, it's also, you would hope, quite secure from the point of view that everything is then interlinked, so we don't end up with many different point solutions where you can find gaps between them. So it's an interesting approach.
I think it's a discussion that every organization has to have, really going everything in one basket or have the different solutions. Really depends on their internal goals and how willing they are to also go into that one direction.
Yeah.
I've seen different approaches, but in general, for the most businesses, I saw the one vendor strategy works best because they just don't have enough people.
Yeah, that's always the case, isn't it? Okay, great. So thanks for that. I think really interesting discussion with regard to the way we do endpoint protection. I suppose this is what you're here for, Damien. Any pearls of wisdom? Or if there were 5 things, let's say, that you wanted to recommend to people with regard to defending their laptops, what would they be? Just as a summary.
5. That's putting me on the spot, isn't it? Well, first of all, I think you've got to use a gateway. You can't rely on split tunneling and VPNs.
You've got to follow your plumber around.
You've got to follow your plumber around and watch what he's doing. Yeah, you've got to pay attention to that corporate application policy around what you can install and what you can't install. I think it's a great bit of advice that Christian gave us. Am I stealing one of his 5 points? Isn't it the privacy screen and the thing?
I'll give him 3. I'll give him 3
because that's just genius. Yeah, and also it's about just thinking about your environment really, and just being aware of where you are. Your laptop can still get stolen if you leave it on the train. Things like that can still happen. Be just aware of the fact when you're in a place with shared Wi-Fi, shared broadband, an open access Wi-Fi on a train or in a coffee shop or something. I think there are the things that I would focus on, really. I don't think that's
Good.
5, but I get the gist of it.
It's great, Damien. Thanks. That's good. Right, Christian, anything you would like to, any more you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I have to just mention it really, like the endpoint detection and response, no matter which solution, but in a corporate environment, you have to make sure that everything that happens on a device is getting correlated to everything else that is happening in your username, so that if an attacker is somehow compromising your identity, it doesn't really matter where he or she comes from. Your IT security team has to see it. And this only can happen if you have the right watchers following your plumber around.
Exactly. So it's not just about following the plumber. It's about having the right people following the plumber. There you go. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, that's just weird. Right. Okay. I suppose from my perspective, I've got to say I find the stuff with regard to the fact that a standard VPN just lets the guy in and then never looks at him again. I find that quite odd. And I agree in the fact that that does seem like a massive omission. So having somebody following your plumber around is a good idea. So go for a next-gen VPN solution. But also, I obviously, we've done it before, but I'll say it again, software updates. More zero-day attacks these days than there are anything else. So if you're interested in security, that's the primary thing to focus on. But display filters, yes. Kensington locks, probably still a no unless you can figure out where to attach them.